Alright, everyone, welcome to the show. I was dealing with a rogue teabag there. But hello and welcome to the Tired Regular. And today is our character spotlight day, and we are going to be discussing, Solomon Kane, the pulp hero who inspired many a broad-brimmed hat wearing solo adventurer going off to deal with the supernatural. There's now that I think about it, there's a lot of that type, and yeah, a lot of them look very much like Solomon Kane. It's a little funny. So, as we usually do, we're going to start off with a little bit of a character bio. We might look at some cool art, some of the comics involved, and some videos, because there are a few videos here. I'm not sure about this one because this one looks like it's AI generated. But and we also have my article that I wrote almost 3 years ago on the character. And but 3 years ago I had a very weird feelings about Solomon Kane when I first read his stuff. Well, that wasn't the first time, but it was my second time giving it a go. But we'll talk about that later. For now, let's get on to the Wikipedia page, and then we'll get to the Marvel one. I keep forgetting that he was in the Marvel universe for a little while. Alright. Oh yeah, and it was a film too. Alright. I don't know why they picked this. Why couldn't they pick a better cover for that? Okay. Solomon Kane is a fictional character created by the pulp era writer Robert E. Howard. Late 16th to early 17th century Puritan, Solomon Kane is a somber-looking man who wanders the world with no apparent goal other than to vanquish evil in all its forms. His adventures, published mostly in pulp magazine Weird Tales, often take him to from Europe to the jungles of Africa and back. Yeah, there are several stories of him going to Africa, and yes, that particular word, well, okay, not that particular word, but the old-timey word for black people was used in those stories. So keep that in mind when you read them. Alright, when Weird Tales published the story Red Nails featuring Conan the Barbarian, the editors introduced it as a tale of a barbarian adventurer named Conan, remarkable for his sheer force of valor and brute strength. Its author, Robert E. Howard, is already a favorite with the readers of this magazine for his stories of Solomon Kane, the dour English Puritan and redresser of wrongs. I find it so sad that he was such a fan favorite, but he still was just so miserable in life. Even though he did seem like a genuinely cool dude. Alright, and Solomon Kane was portrayed by James Purefoy in the film Solomon Kane in 2009. He has also been featured in a series of comics published by Marvel from 1973 to 1994, and again from 2008 to 2009. Personality, species, human, gender, male, occupation, adventure. I love how that's his occupation. Alright, affiliations, allies, Nalonga, John Silent. John Silent is from a fragmented story, but Nalonga, he does appear in a few stories, particularly the ones where Solomon Kane goes to Africa. Enemies, Leloup and the Fishhawk. Weapons, rapier, dirk, musket, flintlock pistols, and the staff of Solomon. That was an interesting piece of his character that when I first read the comics, I was confused because his whole personality is him being a Puritan, and he's using like this weird witch doctor looking staff at some point, and it's like, what the hell? And it turns out the staff of Solomon is like a biblical thing, so it's not totally against his principles to use it. Religion, Puritanism, and Protestantism. Origin, Kingdom of England. Nationality, English. Alright, so in his story Moon of Skulls, Robert E. Howard describes Kane as he was a man born out of his time, a strange blending of Puritan and Cavalier with a touch of the ancient philosopher, and more than a touch of the pagan, though the last assertion would have shocked him unspeakably. An atavist of the days of blind chivalry he was, a knight-errant in the somber clothes of the fanatic. A hunger in his soul drove him on, an urge to right all wrongs, protect all weaker things, avenge all crimes against right and justice. So yeah, that's basically Solomon Kane in a nutshell there. Solomon Kane is a deeply devout Puritan. He is characterized by his fanaticism, unshakable faith, and religious zeal. His forename references King Solomon, who was righteous and wise. His morality is starkly black and white, allowing for no gray areas of uncertainty. To Kane, the wicked are wicked, and the righteous are righteous, with little in between. Sounds like Mr. A, doesn't he? His surname, Kane, is a reference to Kane, the Bible's first murderer, a hint towards Kane's dangerous nature and willingness to take other men's lives. Like Conan the Barbarian, Kane shows a keen sense of chivalry and propriety, defending the innocent and the weak from their wicked oppressors. Kane lives on an endless odyssey to destroy all evil and darkness in the name of God Almighty. He also seems to have little regard for his own life and safety. Yeah, I'm reading some of the original Robert E. Howard stories, and it is so funny how it's like the moment Solomon Kane hears about evildoers doing evil things, he just drops everything and just heads straight for them with a very little regard of his own safety or whether or not he might be either outmatched or he'll be outnumbered. Giving away years of his life to pursue and track down evildoers who deserved punishment. He is the archetypal wandering hero seeking no reward for his actions. Alright, we already went. Okay, the staff, we went over his appearance already, so. Alright, the Staff of Solomon. During one of his later adventures, his friend Nalanga, an African shaman, gave him a juju staff for protection against evil and to be wielded as a weapon. In the Footfalls Within, it is the mystical Staff of Solomon. It is an artifact that belonged to the biblical monarch of ancient Israel, Solomon. Before this, when the world was young, Atlantean and pre-Adamite priests in silent cities beneath the seas used the staff to fight evil, millions of years before mankind was born. That adds a strange bit of, lore to it. That's right, So, what Robert E. Howard did with his universe, everyone in his stories is connected in the same universe. So, Solomon Kane exists in the same universe where Conan once inhabited and Kull the Conqueror once inhabited. Which makes things a little strange, but okay. The staff was older than the earth and unimaginably powerful, more than even Longa knew. With the staff, Moses did wonders before the Pharaoh, and it carried him when his people fled Egypt. For centuries, it was the scepter of Israel, from Numbers 24:17, and Solomon used it to combat magicians or capture jinn. The staff may be Aaron's rod, Moses' rod, or the rod of Eclipsis. I think that's how that's pronounced. It is carved from a wood that no longer exists on Earth. The staff is covered in ancient hieroglyphs and sharply pointed at one end, with the head of a cat on the other. The cat's head is a representation of Bast, and the priest of Bast used the staff in ancient Egypt. The cat's head was carved out of an unknown pre-existing decoration and was added long after the staff was created. Using the staff, Kane can communicate over distances with Nalanga. It has been used to slay vampires and evil spirits. Having carried it for an extended period, it has endowed Kane with the ability to sense otherworldly beings. When Kane is taken prisoner by slavers, Yusuf the Hajid recognizes it and says it's older than the world itself and holds mighty magic. I remember reading one of the comic book version of The Footfalls Within, and at one point when Malanga explains how the staff works and he tries to get Solomon to use it, Solomon kind of sort of throws a little temper tantrum because he doesn't want to use it because he thinks it's magic. And another thing about Solomon Kane is he is very against magic because, Puritan, and that's witchcraft. But Longa finally gets him to use it, and that's when Solomon Kane realizes, okay, this is not like witchcraft, this is actual power I can use to smite evil. Alright. Characters. Speaking of Nalanga, we should probably go over him for a little bit. He is an ancient shaman of pre-colonial Africa who is driven to study magic. He has traveled the world in ancient times as a slave, secretly studying under various sorcerers and holy men of the Middle and Near East. In Judea, he acquired the Staff of Solomon, which he later gave to Solomon Kane to aid him in his wanderings. Longa's magical powers derive from his ability to send his spirit out of his body. The very first time Solomon Kane and Longa met, like their first meeting, he just kind of pops out of nowhere, says hi, says, hey, we can become blood brothers. Of course, Kane is not having it because he's like, who the hell are you? And then Longa goes away for a while. Then they're both tied to a stake and about to be burned. And Longa's like, don't worry, dude, I know what to do. And then he immediately passes out, almost dead, freaking everyone out. And then he possesses a corpse to do his bidding for him. And then once the corpse does its thing, and Solomon and Nalanga are untied from where they are, Nalanga just pops right back to life, and it freaks everyone out, including Solomon. Alright, you can take over bodies of the living and dead through this method. We already did that. And he also summons vultures by sending his spirit to parley with them. Yeah, and he and Solomon Kane are blood brothers, if I remember correctly, from that comic. I haven't gotten to the Footfalls Within the literary version yet, but he did mention in the comic book version that he and Solomon Kane are considered blood brothers. Alright, Le Loup, meaning the wolf. Le Loup is a French criminal mastermind who Kane spends several years tracking down to avenge the murder of a dying girl he found and her whole village. Kane eventually tracks Le Loup to Africa, where he meets Nalanga, and justice is served after Kane kills him in a duel. And it is kind of hinted at that Le Loup did, in fact, rape her. Alright. Jonas Hardraker. He is known on all coasts of the civilized world as a ruthless pirate. He is a tall, raggedy, broad-shouldered man with a lean, hawk-like, cruel face, possibly the reason why he's known as the Fish Hawk. Solomon Kane hunted him for 2 years after Hardraker sank a ship carrying the daughter of an old friend of Kane's, with the old friend going insane after hearing of his daughter's death. Kane finally confronted and killed Hardraker in England, where Hardraker was smuggling alcohol in partnership with Sir George Bonway. Alright, and so here are the works. Well, adaptations. Currently, Solomon Kane is with Titan Comics, as is Conan the Barbarian. And they are currently publishing the Serpent Ring, which today I went over and got the second issue of the Serpent Ring, and I'll probably read it sometime this weekend, though not the weekdays because I have stuff to do. Oh, there's a role-playing game. Huh. I didn't know that. Pinnacle World Entertainment has published a role-playing game based on the character. And there's a board game! What? And of course, the sculptures, toys, and miniatures. Yeah, that goes without saying. Alright, so the trademark of the name Solomon Kane and the names of Robert E. Howard's are claimed by Paradox Entertainment of Stockholm, Sweden. Alright. Alright, so here are the works. Well, adaptations. Current, currently Solomon Kane is with Titan Comics, as is Conan the Barbarian. And they are currently publishing the Serpent Ring, which I today I went over and got the second issue of the Serpent Ring, and I'll probably read it sometime this weekend, though not the weekdays because I have stuff to do. Oh, there's a role-playing game. Since Robert E. Howard published his Solomon Kane stories at a time when the date and publication was the marker, the owners had to use the copyright symbol. I think Solomon Kane is either in the public domain or he's about to be in the public domain. Oh yeah, and other authors too. And the movie, I did watch the Solomon Kane movie, and it was very weird. I mean, it had its moments, but it was also kind of weird. Okay, a lot of people got upset with the fact that they had Solomon Kane be... It's hinted that he's a Catholic. They don't say specific... I don't think they specifically say that he's Catholic, because he still dresses up in the garb of a Puritan, but it's kind of... The iconography in the monastery he was holed up in for a while is a lot more Catholic than Protestant looking. So a lot of people were very upset with him being a Catholic, and it's not anything against Catholics, it's just Solomon Kane isn't a known Protestant, and he is very much so, and he's even had not so much conflicts with other characters who happen to be Catholic, but he does not have a very high opinion of Catholics, mostly because of the Crusades and the Inquisition and blah, 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 blah. Well, not the Crusades, but mostly the Inquisition, you know. And the fact that, you know, England was not very friendly towards Protestants at his particular time interval. So let's pop over to the Marvel side of things, because Marvel did have several Solomon Kane comics, and the only way I was able to get to this website was to allow ads, which I am not happy about, but whatever. We do what we must for research. Alright, appear soon. Alright, history. Alright, Solomon Kane, like Francis Drake and Richard Grenville, was born in Devonshire in the west of England, probably circa 1530. He was raised in the Puritan orthodoxy and was presumably taught fencing early, perhaps by George Silver, Austin Bagger, or another swordsmaster of that era. Alright, adventures. The Puritans were regarded as dangerous heretics, and throughout the later 1500s were persecuted by the Tudor rulers of England. Due to the political context that made his homeland inhospitable, and because of his own restless nature, Solomon Kane traveled early in his youth thanks to the proximity to the great English ports. There are no records of Solomon's early adventures, and that period could be the time Kane traveled to India and China wildly, returning periodically to England, drawn by emotional ties. I mean, yeah, Solomon Kane has in the books, it's very obvious that while he does what he does for God's sake, he very much just prefers to be back in England. Alright, 16th century. Kane's earliest recorded adventure occurred during such a return, when he traveled to the village of Torkertown, where he fought a phantom and brought a murderer to justice. Yep, that was the first Solomon Kane's. Well, not the first. It's the first one in the Del Rey book. Okay. Solomon Kane, with an unshakable faith, went on an endless odyssey to destroy evil and darkness in the name of God and Christ. In that crusade, he fought men and cultists of evil, fierce beasts such as gorillas and beast men, and the rising dead. He was seen by some as a monster hunter. During the 16th century, Solomon Kane faced the Lord of Vampires, Dracula, twice. I remember those stories, and oh boy. Dracula was very flamboyant in those comics. I'm a little surprised that they drew him the way that they did. I have a picture of it in my article, but it's like, what the hell is this? Alright. The first time Solomon Kane was searching for his friend Goodman Carson's daughter, Rosella, who had disappeared in Transylvania. He battled werewolf bandits, but was saved and hosted by Dracula. At Castle Dracula, Kane was approached by the vampirized Rosella, whom he slew. He overcame Dracula, who was unable to slay him, owing the vampire his life. At some point, he saved the niece of Captain Basso from beastmen near Casman. So this is like the Marvel chain of events. This is not necessarily the Robert E. Howard chain of events. Alright, into Africa. Coming along, a dying girl in rural France. Okay. Kane swore to avenge the girl's death by killing her murderer, a French bandit known as La Loupe. He dragged him down to his hideout, slaying all of his gang, but La Loupe managed to escape to Africa, where he became the blood brother of chieftain King Songa. Solomon eventually found La Loupe, killing him and defeating his large bodyguard, Luca the Gorilla Slayer. Alright, the Serpent War. Alright, you get the idea. It was hypothesized Solomon Kane may still be wandering yet. Yeah, you know, Marvel. They have to, like, tease of, oh, he might still be here. Oh, 17th century. In 1610, aged but still physically formidable, Kane returned to Devonshire, intending to finally settle down in his native land. Eventually, he set off towards more adventures. So it's like, he retired for half a second, and then he went off again. Alright. So, I find it funny that this one has no... Oh, there it is. The Ageless Staff of Solomon. Notes. Solomon Kane was created by Robert E. Howard, creator of Conan and Cole. Solomon Kane was under license to Marvel Comics and went over to Dark Horse like Conan, who eventually returned to Marvel in 2019. Like Conan, Solomon Kane is still mentioned as being part of the Marvel Universe during the time Marvel Comics didn't hold the rights to the character. I think that's what that's supposed to be. So, okay. Got a couple of character profiles here. I like comparing the two because the Marvel one seems to be more of the character in his own world biography, whereas the Wikipedia one is a lot more factual. Yeah, there's also another one of Solomon Kane public domain superheroes, but it's also run by Phantom, so it's probably going to be the same information. Let's see if we can just look up some comic book covers. I really want to get my hands on the comic where Mike Mignola was the artist on, because I've seen panels of it and it looks fantastic. So, oh, there's the Serpent Ring cover, and I have this one, the first of this particular Dark Horse miniseries, Castle of the Devil, and I had this one at one point, the Saga of Solomon Kane, where it combined a few different Marvel/Dark Horse comics. Red Shadows, the original Marvel years. Oh, Death's Black Riders. I read that and it was okay. It was okay. They were trying to stitch together a couple of Solomon Kane stories, one of which was unfinished. Like, very unfinished. Like, it was basically just a fragment. Ooh, that is a cool cover. I like how they did his hair here and the beast in the back. Like, that's a very cool cover. Boop. Boop. Okay. This was the miniseries I first read. This was my first introduction to Solomon Kane. And when I was 20 at the time, so this was 10 years ago when I first read Solomon Kane, and I did not like him at all. I thought he just was an ass, basically. And I don't know if maybe I should find this miniseries again and reread it, because I don't know, maybe I just grew up and grew to appreciate him more, or maybe it was this miniseries that just portrayed him as an ass, because I remember reading this and just really not liking Solomon Kane for the first time. And it wasn't until later where I retried him that's like, okay, I'm not completely sold yet, but I see the appeal. And nowadays it's like, okay, I'm really starting to grow on the character. So maybe I should find this miniseries again and reread it and see if I just missed something or if it really did portray Solomon Kane poorly. This is also a cool cover. Now. Oh my god. $125 for the omnibus. As much as I appreciate it, no thank you. Yeah, they got a couple of cool art stories, but I will not be purchasing this because I do not have the money. I am a little too busy spending that on funding my own comic. Alright, so got some of those underway. Let's look at a couple videos now. Alright, we got Marvelous videos here. I've seen a couple of their videos before for a different reason. I think it was Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Hellraiser, but let's open this. Open a new tab.
Hello everyone, this is Austin from Marvelous Videos, and today we have Solomon Kane, Everything That You Need to Know. You've got to admit that the medieval period, especially around the 16th and 17th century mark, was a fascinating time. It was an era where religion and superstition held as much power as the thing.
Okay, that mirror snatching scene was a cool scene from that movie. The CGI is a little bad, but it was a cool scene.
You call science today, and that resulted in some bizarre practices and unexpected events. This offered great potential for the fantasy sci-fi genre, and the sword and sorcery genre in particular. Robert E. Howard is a legend in his own rights, and he was the one to cultivate the immense potential of premising fiction in this area. He is often hailed as the father of the sword and sorcery genre, and the fans have loved his immortal creations such as Conan the Barbarian.
You. Welcome home, Solomon Kane.
Another one of his unforgettable creations is Solomon Kane and the adventures based around him. This was a Puritan who roamed the world simply to fight the evil forces, and thus his journeys and adventures were plentiful. Most of the Solomon Kane stories were published in Weird Tales, an American fantasy and horror fiction pulp magazine that printed works of promising writers like Lovecraft and Clark Ashton Smith. Besides some fascinating stories, there has also been a live-action adaptation, and Solomon Kane became popular as a brand. In this video, we will explore the origin of this mysterious hero, his adventures, and also the feature film based upon his character.
Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot.
Okay, this scene just really confused me in the movie. It's like, what the hell? I should confess, first time watching this movie, I was a little tipsy, so boyfriend and I were trying to make Skyline for the first time, and we just popped this movie on while we were doing it, and we got a little too hammered, and so some of this movie is a little foggy to me, I will admit. I'm trying to rewatch it. I'm trying to rewatch it.
Thank you. Let's begin.
A little something about Solomon Kane. So who is Solomon Kane, and what is he all about? Well, the similarities with Conan are stark, but they are also very different in many ways. You could say that Solomon Kane was a Puritan version of Conan, and this skilled warrior has the sole mission of righting all wrongs. He abides by the Puritan code of ethics, and thus he has a strong sense of morality that dictates.
Yeah, this is what I meant, where it wasn't in this particular scene or segment where he's at the monastery. It's not, if I remember correctly, it's not explicitly said it's Catholic, but it does have a lot of similar looking stuff to what Catholic monasteries looked like back then. I don't know, what do you think? And were you bothered at all by the fact that it kind of hinted that Solomon Kane was a Catholic in the movie version? Because I know quite a few people were not happy about that.
His actions. He was born in Devonshire, in West England sometime around 1530. He was brought up in the Puritan orthodoxy, which strengthened his belief system. Great sword masters taught him fencing and made him so lethal with the sword in hand. However, it is to be noted that he didn't exactly have a hulkish stature. He stood tall at 6 feet, but he appeared to be moderately built. He did have incredible strength, and it was because of his undying determination and belief in his cause. He dressed in black, wore a trademark slouch hat, and carried a well-equipped arsenal complete with pistols, daggers, and the magical staff of Solomon.
I am the only devil here.
The Puritan sects were regarded as hostile by the Tudor rulers of England, and they were openly persecuted for their beliefs and practices. Thus, his homeland was not hospitable enough for him, and Solomon Kane had a restless nature that never allowed him to settle in one place. His endless crusade to destroy all forms of evil in the name of God made him fight everything from terrible men to cultists to monsters. The stories surrounding him are marvelously innovative, and they feel quite real in many ways. It almost feels like the author had witnessed the events that he describes, and this is what makes the stories feel so real. Yes, Solomon Kane is an interesting character, but it is Robert E. Howard's credit that he created such depth in the stories even within the limits of the pulp story format. The Solomon Kane...
I kind of wonder what Robert E. Howard's thought process was to make Solomon Kane the way he was. I don't know. Let's look that up. Because if I remember correctly, he was not a Puritan. Okay, AI answer tells us Robert E. Howard made Solomon Kane a Puritan because he wanted to create a character who was a blend of Puritan and Cavalier with a touch of ancient... okay, that's... Okay. Kane is 16th century English Puritan, warrior wanderer. Unlike the free-spirited Cimmerian, Kane is brooding, self-inflicting... is a brooding, self-inflicting sense of justice. That did not answer my question. Oh. Let's take a look at this. Skulls in the Stars. Robert E. Howard's religious beliefs. This might prove to be interesting because it is a very big why. Because I don't think this brand... Was this brand of Puritanism that popular in 1920s, 1930s Texas, where Robert E. Howard is from? Because I think they would be more, I don't know, Baptist? I don't know. All right. By Skulls in the Stars. All right. Now that I'm thinking of Solomon Kane, I thought I'd do a brief post about the character, his adventures, and the clear influence Howard's religious beliefs had on both. Alright, Puritan warrior. Alright, like all Robert E. Howard's fictional heroes, he is larger than life and almost elemental in his pursuits. Kane is dressed drably and as one would expect. Perhaps it is best to let Howard describe Kane's garb. Blades of the Brotherhood. The stranger's cloth was severely plain and suited the man. His hat was a black slouch, featherless. From heel to neck, he was clad in close-fitted garments of a somber hue, unrelieved by ornaments or jewel. No ring adorned his powerful fingers, no gem twinkled on his rapier hilt, and its long blade was cased in a plain leather sheath. There were no silver buttons on his garments, no bright buckles on his shoes. Strangely enough, the drab monotone of his dress was broken in a novel and bizarre manner by a wide sash knotted gypsy-like at his waist. The sash was silk of oriental workmanship. Its color was a shimmering green, and from it projected a dirk hilt and the butts of 2 heavy pistols. So that's where the green sash came from. Okay. Alright, Kane's weapons are typically a pair of flintlock pistols, a dirk, and a rapier, and he is master of them all. His desire to fight evil... Okay, Alright, so Red Shadows. Alright, love that scene. Right, Kane quickly comes to learn that justice often comes in the form it does not fit with his comes to learn that justice often comes in a form that does not fit his black and white view of morality. In his pursuit of the loop in Africa, he encounters tribal witch doctor without whose help he could not have prevailed. The wilds and darkness of the jungle calls to him, and he explores it, seeking something unknown even to him. As often as not, his witch doctor brother Nlanga aids him in his adventures, and the conflict within Kane from allying with forces he assumed to be dark is evident in many of the stories. Okay. Here we are. Here we are. I think this is it. At other times, though, Kane demonstrates a fervent religiosity and makes speeches worthy of any hellfire and brimstone preacher. This uncertain faith seems to be at least a partial reflection of Howard's own views. To quote from a letter to H.P. Lovecraft received the 22nd of September 1932, I noted with interest your comments regarding the supernatural, etc., and am not equipped to dispute any point of your theories. I never gave a name to my views, or lack of views, but I guess I am an agnostic, but I guess an agnostic is what I am, if that means skepticism regarding all human groupings. Perhaps the main reason I dislike to take a firm stance in any direction is because of the respect I have for my father's intelligence. He is not by any means convinced that there is nothing in the matters mentioned. He is far better educated than I and has more natural sense than I'll ever have. Scientist? He is a practical scientist. Is ever lived one. For more than 30 years, he has been applying science in his daily life. There are no better physician in the state of Texas, though there are many who have made more of a financial success. Okay, so he's agnostic, but that does leave the question of why he made Kane a Puritan. And if he, who has plunged his hands deep into the very guts of life and death, and seen things that an average man seldom ever dreams, if he is not ready to deny the existence of a future state, then I, for one, do not care to deny it. These college professors I mentioned, though they knew things because they had read books, or thought they knew things because they had read books. He has read the books, and more than that, he has known life in its reddest, rawest, most elemental phases. Honest men, thieves, white men, Mexicans, to all he has given and gives in the same earnest attention. It has mattered little to him whether the man or woman under his care were a saint or a criminal, a rich man or a beggar. Many and many a time he has kept watch over the sick bed. Oh no. Of some poor pauper, himself neither eating or sleeping, oblivious to all else except the battle he was waging with the destroyer. Alright, this passage suggests two things to me. That Howard had a bit of conflict himself about religion, and that he describes his father as very much the sort of hero he writes about. And, interesting. I've also noted previously a passage in a Conan story in which King Conan rebukes those subjects who would subject others to religious persecution. Those interested... Okay. So, that didn't quite answer my question. So maybe he made Solomon Kane as fanatical of a Puritan as he did because of that conflict. And I have heard this from agnostics before, where they are fascinated with religious people, and especially like feverishly, fanatically religious people, because of their faith. It's like they are conflicted in themselves, and they are fascinated by these people who are so strong in their faith. So, sorry, I was lighting something on fire. So maybe that explains why Robert E. Howard made him the Puritan that he is, because it seems like he didn't grow up in a strictly religious household. It seems like his father was very much a skeptic, if not an atheist. So yeah, that was an interesting read. I don't know. You guys leave me your interpretation of that passage. Alright, let's get back to the video so I can stop talking and drink my tea.
In stories published in Weird Tales. We have already mentioned that most of the
What the hell is that face?
Solomon Kane stories were first published in Weird Tales.
What is this face? That is such a weird looking face. Is that supposed to be Solomon Kane? Oh my god, they made him look like a doofus on the cover. Okay.
This magazine introduced us to some brilliant stories featuring this
Ooh, that's a cool cover. That's a very cool cover.
iconic character, and all of them are a must-read for the fans of this genre. Let us look into some of those popular stories that were published during this time. Red Shadows. During one of his travels through France, Solomon Kane stops due to sudden movements among the trees. When he goes ahead to examine, he finds a young girl mortally wounded. He wants to know who or what harmed the innocent little girl, and she narrates the horrors faced by her. Loup and his men raided their village and robbed and killed everyone in sight. One of the men, the wolf, caught hold of this little girl and stabbed her with his dagger. She dies in the arms of Solomon Kane, and he swears to avenge the killing of this innocent soul. He eventually catches up with the gang, slaying the members one by one, eventually hunting down Loup as well. The events soon take him to Africa, and this is where he meets his dear friend Nalanga. Skulls and the Stars. This particular story is premised in England, where Solomon Kane is headed for the hamlet of Torkertown. There are two paths that lead to the hamlet, and one of them passes through a moor, and it is supposedly haunted. Over the years, several travelers have taken that road, but...
Here's something very funny that I found from this story. So remember in that passage where Robert E. Howard was describing Solomon, and he mentions that Solomon Kane had a bit of paganism within himself, which is something that he would be aghast to know. But you'd be surprised when you read the actual narrative how much Solomon Kane suppresses within himself. Like he comes across as super cool and confident in the comic books, like he has zero doubts whatsoever, but when you read the narrative, he does get tempted, and he does have those moments of humanity where he recognizes a feeling that's coming up, or like a doubt that's coming up, and he just immediately squashes it down. But here's a funny little passage. Alright, trying to find it. Far back in Kane's gloomy eyes, a celescent light had begun to glimmer, like a witch's torch glinting under fathoms of cold gray ice. His blood quickened. Adventure! The lure of life, risk, and battle. The thrill of breathtaking, touch-and-go drama. Not that Kane recognized his sensation as such. He sincerely considered that he voiced his real feelings when he said, "These things be deeds of some power of evil, the lords of darkness have laid a curse upon the country. Strong man is needed to combat Satan and his might. Therefore I go, who have defied him many a time. So, it's like that establishes that even though Solomon Kane is very, very somber, and he's very fanatical in himself, it's like underneath those layers of gloom and darkness and somberness, there's like a little 13-year-old shonen protagonist who just wants to run off into the hills and like punch monsters in the face because it's fun. And he doesn't want to recognize that part of him is still in there. So he just is like, nope, I'm doing this because evil bad, and I am going to destroy the evil for God, in God's name. But it's like, no, dude, a little bit of you in there, you're in it for the adventure too. And I don't think that counts against him, but it makes him very human. And in another story, The Moon of the Skulls, where the evil queen is basically trying to seduce him and basically trying to be like, she's like, hey, you have good qualities of a king. How about you become my husband, and then we can rule together, and then we can take over the world together. But yeah, her motivation is world domination. Very funny. But there is a split second where he's tempted. He is tempted, and also because she is very beautiful, as described in the story, but there is that small temptation there, and he immediately quashes it out. And I think that's might have been another reason why I initially didn't like Solomon Kane, is because the comic books skip over these segments of his character, and they get straight to the action, which is what a comic book is supposed to do, but you cut out other parts of his humanity where he's either conflicted or he does have those moments of, like, those flickering moments of weakness there.
None of them came out alive. Kane is warned about the dangers of the Moor Road, but the Braveheart decides to investigate the matter nonetheless. This leads to one of the deadliest battles for Kane, where his enemy is like a mist. The sword is useless in the fight, and it takes much more than his strength to win this fight. Rattle of Bones. This time, the adventurers take Solomon Kane to Germany, where he comes across a fellow traveler named Gaston L'Armand. He seems quite familiar, and the two decide to stay together for the night at the Cleft Skull Tavern. As you would expect, things don't stay peaceful for much longer, and Solomon Kane soon has to deal with some dark forces on the prowl. The Moon of Skulls. Kane has also encountered vampires in the course of his adventures, and this happens to be one of those instances. He is investigating.
I mean, she's called the Queen of the Vampires, but I haven't finished the story yet, so maybe she really is a vampire. But I think she's just kind of called that because she is a very ruthless bitch. That's the nice way of describing it.
The mysterious kidnapping of an English girl called Marilyn Taffarel. She has been kidnapped from her home, and Solomon Kane picks up her trail all the way to Africa. Apparently, she has been sold to Barbary pirates by one of her cousins, and she is currently in grave danger. This adventure leads Kane to face the vampire queen of the hidden city of Nagari.
Why is she white? Why is she white in that comic? She's African. Why is she white here? That is so weird.
Fighting evil forces doesn't get much tougher than this. Hills of the Dead. We tread further into vampire territories. This story is once again premised in Africa. Nalanga, Kane's dear old friend, is once again introduced in this narrative, and he offers some valuable help to the righteous hero. He hands him a magic wooden staff that is supposed to protect him from the evil powers. It comes in handy when he encounters a city of vampires inside of a jungle. There are many notable stories surrounding Solomon Kane. The Footfalls Within, Wings in the Night, Blades of the Brotherhood, The Right Hand of Dune, and some fragmented shorts like The Castle of the Devil and Death's Black Riders are some of the popular ones. Other authors have also stepped in to pen down the incomplete shorts, but none of their works were as impactful as the original creator, Robert E. Howard. Solomon Kane. Origin and personality. We have seen Solomon Kane as the righteous, moral hero, but his origin story shed more light into the depths of his character. His determination to rid the world of all evil comes not only from his desire to protect the world, it is also indicated that he is atoning for his past sins, and the fights and altercations give him an opportunity to unleash his inner rage on the unfortunate baddies. His name is also fairly indicative of his personality. Solomon is the biblical judge, and Kane was the first assassin in human history. Put together, Solomon Kane is a man who judges right from wrong and punishes the evil with furious anger. If there is one vice in this man, it has to be his uncontrollable rage. However,
that is one similarity he shares with Conan. Both of them go into barbaric rages. And whereas Conan just accepts it because it's like, yeah, this is kind of just how I was raised, and this is kind of just how I have to live, Solomon is not exactly happy that these happen to him. He doesn't particularly like going into these rages. He just kind of does, from what I can tell.
This has also allowed him to defeat enemies far more superior than him, simply because of his determined anger. It is also to be noted that his rage has never caused harm to the innocent, so he has successfully used his flaw as his strength.
Come on.
It is thoroughly entertaining to read about a man with no superpowers, fighting powerful forces of evil. Solomon Kane is a mighty swordsman, and his strength and stamina are more than the average man. But he is still immortal, simply powered by his faith and beliefs. It is fascinating how he defeated even the supernatural forces and enemies way more powerful than him. The Staff of Solomon was quite a handy weapon in his arsenal. This was offered to him by his friend Nalanga, and it was rumored that the staff was older than the earth. It had a magical item inside that could scare away paranormal forces, and holding it allowed Kane an enhanced sensitivity to supernatural powers. It was made of a type of wood that no longer exists on the planet, and the staff is covered with ancient hieroglyphs and inscriptions. The staff has a sharp pointed end and a head of a cat on the other end. We learn more about the magical staff when he is taken prisoner by slavers during one of his adventures. The cat head also represents Bast, the Egyptian goddess, and priests use it in Egypt to fight evil forces, a tribute to the creator. Words fall short expressing our admiration for the creator of Solomon Kane, the one and only Robert E. Howard. He passed away at the age of 30, but in his short life he has immortalized himself with some evergreen characters. The father of sword and sorcery was born in Texas, and he grew up as an avid reader. He always wanted to become a writer of fiction, and tasted success by the time he was only 23 years old. Several magazines and newspapers published his works, but Weird Tales has...
This doesn't sound morbid, but you think if Robert E. Howard knew how much we would have appreciated him today, do you think he would have committed suicide? Because he was dealing with a lot of mental problems and just stressors during that time, and he probably was in a dark spot. Do you think he would have continued to live on if he knew just how influential and how appreciated he is nowadays? I don't know. Just a thought I had there.
To be the most important one that published most of his stories. The one who entertained us with his magical stories did not have a perfect life himself. His mother suffered from tuberculosis, and it left a deep impact on his mental health. In fact, he committed suicide in the prime of his life, when he learned that his mother had slipped into a coma and would not recover. We were deprived of many more of these gems, but what he created is still regarded as gold in the world of fantasy fiction. His characters, like Conan and Solomon Kane, became a part of pop culture for many years after his death, and Robert E. Howard will always have a special place in our hearts. Live action adaptation. It has been a long journey for the fans that were eagerly awaiting the movie adaptation of Solomon Kane. The rights were acquired in 1997, but it took 9 more years to start filming. Eventually, the action-adventure movie titled Solomon Kane was released in 2008, and it got a decent response from the audience. However, it wasn't exactly a commercial success, and that got the future films in line cancelled. Initially, this movie was perceived to be the first in a trilogy, but a box office flop meant the plans never materialized.
It was supposed to be a trilogy? Huh. I don't know how I feel about that. Because the first movie worked fine enough on its own. I don't know how you can expand it upon it into a trilogy. But then again, maybe it's a good thing that it wasn't made into a trilogy. And what is this birthday cake over here for? Oh my gosh, it's YouTube's birthday? Hold on. No, not, alright, no, not birthday songs. Oh, February 14th, 2005. Wait, then why did it say it's our birthday? What the hell is up with that? What the fuck is up with that? Okay, I got distracted there. Sorry.
This movie is directed by MJ Bassett, and she chose her own original story instead of picking up from the available Solomon Kane storylines. The film begins in the year 1600, where Solomon Kane is leading his men to fight the Ottoman occupiers. In an intense battle, most of his men are killed, and he encounters a powerful demon. It tells him that his soul is forfeited to Satan because of his life of sin, and the defiant Solomon jumps out of the window to escape. Many years later, he has renounced his life of violence and he seeks a redemption. He is expelled from the monastery where he took shelter, and thus begins his life as a traveler. After he's attacked by robbers on the road, a Puritan family takes him in. They even come across Meredith Crowthorns, a witch, but their peaceful life is interrupted by an evil sorcerer named Malachi. Meredith is kidnapped and her family is killed. Kane gives up on his non-violent vows in order to rescue her from Malachi's clutches.
What are you?
His journey takes him through the countryside and takes down several of Malachi's minions. Many of those held captive are freed by him, but there are no signs of Meredith. He learns that Malachi has been corrupting his followers into becoming slaves and soldiers, and during one of his attacks he finds out that Meredith is dead. Solomon is distraught and goes off to drink at the country inn. He meets some of his old followers, the men who fought alongside him, and they offer him to lead them against the oppressive Malachi. All of a sudden, Malachi's forces attack, and everyone along with Solomon himself are crucified. Just when he is about to give up all hope, he hears the voice of Meredith from one of the cages in the raiders' wagon. With a new zeal, he frees himself, and the raiding group is slaughtered by him and the men of the resistance. It all boils down to an intense final confrontation with Malachi. The latter tries to use Meredith's blood to summon a demon and claim Solomon's soul, but his plans are foiled when Solomon shoots him dead. He sacrifices himself to close the portal.
Oh yeah, Malachi is revealed to be his brother. That was weird. That was very weird.
To the hellish dimension, and he survives because through his good deeds he finally redeems his soul.
My God, only you can help me now.
Our take on the movie is a typical old-fashioned sword and sorcery flick that entertains as an excellent dark adventure. What we loved most about this film is how it managed to rise above the usual formula for such movies. The protagonist is a much darker and conflicted character than the average hero, and the story is not just a maze of mindless action. The gritty and monochromatic look of the movie has to be appreciated, and it is in perfect sync with the ambiance. The visuals are simply mind-blowing, and the shots in the dark are worth watching again and again. The slow pacing of the narrative is not a negative for this movie, but in fact it enhances
the background. I don't know why, I really like that window. Very pretty.
the experience as you relish the complex storyline minus any loopholes. It is predictable at times, but what do you really expect from such a plot? One of the strongest assets for the movie would have to be the remarkable acting performance. James Purefoy as Solomon Kane is a treat to watch. He is perfect as the ruthless killer with a troubled past, and he is effortless in the fight sequences. Coming to the fight scenes, they are well choreographed and look remarkably real. The special effects, makeup, and near-perfect sets help Solomon Kane become an unforgettable experience, and we would love a continuation to the journey. The sets have been designed by Ricky Ears, the man who worked in classics like Saving Private Ryan, and his expertise shows. Bassett does a great job of balancing the tender moments and all the action. It is unfortunate that the film only collected half the production cost at box office. Don't go by the negativity surrounding the movie, and we bet you will be pleasantly surprised by the end result.
I have found my purpose. There was a time when the world was plunging into darkness.
Future of the Solomon Kane franchise.
Yeah, we know about that. I think a good reason, well, not good, but I think one of the big reasons why Solomon Kane has floundered to get a foothold in the modern day is because of his fanatic Puritanism. Because we live in a much more secular society than back in Robert E. Howard's time. And I think that because Solomon Kane is just such a very outspoken Christian, it kind of turned a lot of people off from it. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, and I'm not saying that it makes him impossible for people to, read his stuff and enjoy him. I'm just saying it's because of the society we live in now that more people are turned off by the fact that he is a religious fanatic. I don't know. You guys let me know your opinion on why this is. Alright. Do we have any more good ones? That is a German rating of it. Hey, there's my stream! Serpent Ring number 1. Oh, there's Razor Fist. Alright. Hi, Jack Kirby. Hi, Alan Moore. I think... Oh, Surface. Oh, Serpent Ring official trailer. Nice. And Helsing. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of media. Well, there is, like, the lists, but... Whoa, 4 hours ago. Ah, dang. Let's check this out.
Hello, this is Todd Luck, and are you interested in the works of Robert E. Howard, but you find Conan to be too sinful for you, with all the womanizing and the drinking and the swearing on the names of heathen gods? No, you want to read about a hero who is pious and righteous and a man of God, but for some reason still ends up killing a hell of a lot of bad people because for some reason God's down with that. Well, I've got the hero for you. It's Robert E. Howard's Puritan adventurer, Solomon Kane. This is a guide to all of the Solomon Kane comics that I know of that exist and how you can get them and read them for yourself. And it's a surprisingly small amount of comics, but I'm going to include a list of everything I talk about in the description for this video. And I'm also, after we talk about the comics, I'm also going to talk about why there's so few comics and how if history had gone just a little bit different, this would be a much longer video. Believe it or not, Solomon Kane actually predates Cole and Conan. He actually first appeared in the Robert E. Howard prose story Red Shadows in 1928 in the pulp magazine Weird Tales. Solomon Kane actually predates Robert E. Howard's creation of the sword and sorcery genre, which combines elements of horror and fantasy together and is considered to be just a horror character, and so he differs from Robert E. Howard's later characters like Cole and Conan. Cole and Conan are in fictional time periods created by Robert E. Howard. Solomon Kane exists in real historic times. And so we'll often see Conan as this callous, bloodthirsty mercenary and thief and scoundrel. But Solomon Kane is actually a good person. He is a righteous man. And don't get me wrong, he's got to pay the innkeeper like everyone else. And so he does take his mercenary jobs and all that. But most Solomon Kane stories that we see are based around him dispensing justice, which he does free of charge.
Well, I mean, he like I said before, he does go into his barbaric rages. Like, he shares he and Conan share a lot more DNA than you would think.
Righteous indignation is kind of his pastime. And lastly, Conan and Cole's stories tend to have the barbarian heroes fighting some kind of supernatural evil and conquering it in some fashion. Solomon Kane does that sometimes, but it's not a requirement of a Solomon Kane story. Sometimes the evil is dealt with in completely different ways. He may be delivered by some other supernatural force. He may actually just be a witness to the supernatural evil. Solomon Kane's stories are about this righteous, God-fearing man realizing that the world is bigger and scarier than anything in his belief system. And so when it comes to Robert E. Howard comics, obviously Conan is king. Conan has so many comics that have been put out in the last 55 years, it's almost impossible for the average person to have them all. And I've done a video guide to Cole Comics, and Cole does have a decent body of work in comics. However, it is much smaller than Conan, and it is possible to get all the Cole comics over time. But with Solomon Kane, there's actually not that many comics, and it is very easy to get them all and read them all. In fact, I'm going to give you one recommendation that's going to cover a third of the stories that have been published with Solomon Kane. And that is the Saga of Solomon Kane trade paperback. This is from Dark Horse, and don't worry, I'll cover your omnibus recommendations at the end. But this is a collection of all of the short stories that ran in Marvel's magazines, most notably Savage Sword of Conan. And so this is actually most of the material that Marvel published of Solomon Kane in one volume. Now, if you're like me, you've probably got an issue of Savage Sword here and there. You've fished out of back issue bins that have Solomon Kane stories in it. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, look, this says there's only 20 stories in here, so I bet I could just go and get all the back issues instead of getting this collection. The problem with that is a lot of Solomon Kane stories are
very expensive.
in the oldest and rarest magazines that Marvel put out. So his first appearance was in Monsters Unleashed #1, followed by Dracula Lives #3, both published in 1973, followed by issues 2 and 3 of Cole and the Barbarians, before he started appearing in Savage Sword of Conan in short stories, starting with issue 13. And so all I had to do was look at the cost of getting one of those issues, and I was like, nope, I'm good with getting the trade paperback, because this is the way more affordable way to read those short stories. And one of the coolest things about this trade is that the short stories were accompanied by text pieces that tell you where they took place in Solomon Kane's life. Now, most of them are published in chronological order to when they happened for Solomon Kane, but this was something that I never knew was the case with Solomon Kane. I thought it was just a bunch of short stories, so it's kind of cool that they kind of come together to tell the life story of this Puritan adventurer, and is truly the Saga of Solomon Kane.
That is my big gripe with the Del Rey. I know that Robert E. Howard, he did sometimes, especially with Conan, he kind of went back and forth with the timeline, because the first Conan story was King Conan, and then it went back in time to when he was younger, then forward in time again a little bit to a different part of Conan's life, and blah 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 blah. And I don't know if they did the same thing with Solomon Kane in the Del Rey edition, but it would be nice to know just exactly where in his life this happens.
And if you're familiar with Marvel's Solomon Kane, you may know that his final appearances for Marvel was in Savage Sword 219 and 220, which was a crossover with Conan. And actually, Savage Sword 220 was my first time ever seeing Solomon Kane back in the day. And I wasn't sure if this would be included because it is kind of a Conan story, but I am happy to say it is absolutely in this Solomon Kane collection. And it's fantastic because this is Roy Thomas's adaptation of the Solomon Kane fragment Death's Black Riders, but it also follows up on the Solomon Kane story Moon of Skulls. And this trade paperback was the first time I'd read Moon of Skulls, so this actually gave me the first opportunity I'd ever had to actually experience Death's Black Riders in full context and get all of the different references Roy was making. And Death's Black Riders is the final story in here and makes a very appropriate ending for the saga of Solomon Kane. Marvel did put out a few color comics of Solomon Kane, starting with Marvel Premiere 33 and 34, which adapt Red Shadows. And if you're familiar with that story, you may be wondering what the heck is going on with this cover. So Roy Thomas, when he's adapting Red Shadows, actually adds a prologue set in Europe with some supernatural elements, and that's what you see on the cover. But Marvel Premiere 34 has a cover with Kane in Africa, which definitely looks a lot more like Red Shadows. And then in the 80s, Marvel put out a 6-issue Sword of Solomon Kane miniseries, and each issue is self-contained stories. Some of them are adaptations, and some of them are original stories, and it begins, of course, with another adaptation of Red Shadows. Incidentally, if you're thinking to yourself, Hellboy artist Mike Mignola would make the perfect Solomon Kane artist, he actually did do the artwork for issue 4 of this miniseries. And in my opinion, all of the issues are good in this miniseries. This is the miniseries that made me fall in love with Solomon Kane.
Okay, maybe I do need to reread that series then.
The individual color issues are relatively affordable, but if you want to go the trade paperback route, Dark Horse did collect all of the color Solomon Kane issues from Marvel in a trade paperback called The Chronicles of Solomon Kane. Now, if you'd like all of the Solomon Kane comics, both color and black and white, from that original Marvel run in one volume, there is an omnibus called Solomon Kane, The Original Marvel Years. Now, this is out of print, so the prices may be all over the place.
Oh my god, I don't even want to look at the price for this one.
It retailed originally for $100, and you shouldn't have to pay too much more for it than that. But I will say that Titan Comics now has the rights to do Solomon Kane, and as we talk about in a minute, is putting out new material, and I expect at some point they will probably reissue this omnibus. And that was all of the Marvel comics of Solomon Kane that I know of from that era. But before we get to Dark Horse, we're going to take a little bit of a side trip in the 80s to Blackthorn for Solomon Kane 3D. Now, this is one of the rarer Solomon Kane comics that came out. This is probably going to set you back about $25 if you can find this on eBay.
Oh, damn, that's not that bad.
Oftentimes, you might have to get it from a foreign seller, but don't let this cover fool you. I know the cover's a little bit plain. This was actually an ad that they ran for this issue originally in 3D, and so it looks kind of plain when they just put it on the cover. But the interior artwork is professionally done. It looks like it's straight out of a Marvel Solomon Kane comic, and the story reads like it's a Marvel Solomon Kane comic too. It's well researched as far as the backstory of the character, and it's a good solid story. And
looks like you're gonna need to buy one of those 3D glasses to read it, because that would just mess with my head. I think I would get a headache if I continued with it.
3D effects are really spectacular. And then our wandering Puritan's journey takes him to Dark Horse Comics, who of course will put out a series of miniseries of Solomon Kane. Each miniseries will be a serialized adaptation of a single Robert E. Howard short story. And so that's going to begin with a miniseries simply titled Solomon Kane. It's 5 issues, and it adapts The Castle of the Devil. Next up is Dark Horse's version of Death's Black Riders that takes a more Lovecraftian approach to the fragment by Robert E. Howard. And the final 4-issue Solomon Kane miniseries is an adaptation of, say it with me kids, Red Shadows, because you can never have too many adaptations of that story. Now, one of the big differences between Dark Horse and Marvel is that Marvel had more realistic artwork and more detailed artwork, and the artwork on the Dark Horse comics tended to be a lot more stylized. Another big difference was that the miniseries were very decompressed, and each issue only had a very small amount of story, and so all of the issues were really meant to be read as a single unit of storytelling. So not everyone's probably going to dig the more abstract art on some of these comics, but I think the stories are certainly worth.
I think the art that I saw from the first issue of the first miniseries, it looked okay. Death's Black Riders, I was like, especially towards the end of it.
Picking up regardless of what you think about the artwork. And back in the day, I did get a little bit annoyed about how little story was in each of the issues. You know, you would get a little bit of story and then have to wait a month to get a little bit more story, and you wouldn't get a conclusion until 4 or 5 months later. But guess what, kids? These are now back issues and trade paperbacks, and so you can pick up all the back issues at one time or pick up the trade paperback of each of these miniseries and read them at any pace you want to read them at, right? If you want to read them all in one setting, I think that's a fantastic way to do it. Dark Horse did put out 2 more Solomon Kane stories that I'm aware of, and those were short stories that ran in Robert E. Howard's Savage Sword. So the first one is in issue 8. And then the last one is in issue 10, and unfortunately this was the final issue of the series, and it's harder to find, so the price can be a little higher on this one. I got mine for I think about $20 on an auction. You may see them for a little bit higher than that. And so after that, we have Solomon Kane's homecoming to Marvel Comics. So he does return to Marvel Comics along with the other Robert E. Howard properties. Unfortunately, he only appears as part of an ensemble cast in a single miniseries called Conan Serpent War that ran for 4 issues. And so after that, Solomon Kane would arrive at his new home and his current home at Titan Comics, and he would have short stories in the back of the first 4 issues of Titan Comics' Savage Sword of Conan.
My boyfriend is collecting that series, so I might have to borrow a couple of his issues to see those.
He also appears in the 4-issue miniseries Conan, Battle of the Black Stone. He's part of an ensemble cast of Robert E. Howard heroes again, but this time at least he gets to fight Conan. And currently there is a 4-issue miniseries called Solomon Kane, The Serpent Ring, and you've been looking at that first issue of it over my shoulder this entire video. The miniseries, as well as the short stories in those
The art in this one is very, very good. I do really love the art that they have in this.
First 4 issues of Savage Sword are done by Patch Zurcher, who, in my opinion, is doing some stellar work on Solomon Kane, so check it out. And so that's it for Solomon Kane Comics. There is a movie that I'll be reviewing at some point. It's simply called Solomon Kane. There are a couple of Solomon Kane action figures. One is from Mezco. It's their 112 Solomon Kane, and it's very nice, but it goes for well over $100.
Yeah, that's why I do not collect figurines, because I'm already spending a good chunk of change collecting comic books. I do not need figurines on top of my shopping addiction.
There's also a Mego-style figure in the World's Greatest Heroes line, but that's probably not going to be a whole lot cheaper at this point. And I think the thing that really strikes me about Solomon Kane is just how little material there is for how long this character has been around. And so for most of his comic career, he's only had short stories as backups in Savage Sword, but that actually wasn't Roy Thomas's original intention. While reading the letter columns in some 70s Cole comics, I found out that Roy actually had the intention for Savage Sword to be Conan stories, and Cole and the Barbarians were going to be the showcase for other Robert E. Howard characters like Cole, Solomon Kane, and Red Sonja. But of course that didn't happen. Cole and the Barbarians was very short-lived, and Solomon Kane was relegated to a sometimes backup feature for Conan's magazine. If the original plan had worked out, we probably would have had a lot more Solomon Kane material. Heck, maybe he would have even caught on and had an ongoing series. We certainly would have more Solomon Kane stories, and typically when something like that happens, You get a lot more stories with the character like we're seeing with Red Sonja. Some of those stories are great stories we wouldn't have normally gotten, and then some of them are mediocre or just downright bad. And so it's kind of a mixed bag, but I definitely would have liked to have seen more Solomon Kane.
I think, again, it's that age-old thing where we live in a more secular society, so he probably wouldn't have been that popular. And also 80s and 90s. It was a very different culture for comic books.
All right, that's it for this guide to Solomon Kane comics. Like and subscribe for more videos. And until next time, see ya.
My guess is he made this video as a like a celebration of the second issue for Serpent Ring. What the fuck is that? I'm gonna scoot down here and see what the hell that's all about. I shall save this to watch later, because that looks like a very interesting video. Okay, so I think to finish off this series, we're going to look at this article written by a very familiar looking face and name. Yeah, 6-minute read. Let's go to it. Alright. And I did do my best to try and credit artists and credit where I got the art from, because the Ugly Monster is a big stickler for crediting. Mostly in the last couple of years, but we're not going to get into that. Alright. If you spend enough time in the comic book world, you'll run into the name Robert E. Howard pretty quickly. Despite his short time on Earth, Howard is arguably one of the most important pillars in nerd culture. He was a pulp fiction writer back in the late 20s and early 30s who mainly published in Weird Tales magazine and is considered the father of the sword and sorcery genre. His most famous creation that I know you've heard of was Conan the Barbarian, who is still being written about to this day. Alright, history lesson over. Yeah, that's kind of how I was writing back then. I still kind of write that way a little bit, but nowadays not as quirky. Alright, famous. Alright. One of Howard's many creations was a character named Solomon Kane, a Puritan adventurer whose stories were set in a more historically accurate time. While I was still in college, I stumbled across a Solomon Kane miniseries from the 80s and picked it up. I knew of him and knew that he was important in comic culture, so I decided to give him a shot. My verdict back then: Solomon Kane is a self-righteous asshole. I seriously could not stand the man from that miniseries. I regret not remembering the story's name. Well, now we know it's a collection of different stories. Kane was a Christian Puritan, so I could give him some leeway for his rigid beliefs. However, when it came to him exploring outside of Europe, like his time in Africa, he became intolerable. Jesus Christ, does this man demonize anything that isn't from his religion? I'd never read the original Solomon Kane stories before then, but from what I saw, I concluded that these were the writings of a sheltered white guy shut up in his mother's attic. Yeah, that was how much I did not like Solomon Kane back then, and it's kind of funny now how I get excited to see another Solomon Kane issue. Years went by and I completely forgot about Solomon Kane and that miniseries. That is, until I came across the old Dark Horse collection of 20 Solomon Kane stories right alongside the Conan books in one of my favorite comic shops. Yeah, it's a little hippy-dippy shop up in Yellow Springs. Dark Star, very nice place. And the guy who runs the shop, he is very knowledgeable about comic books too. It's mostly a bookshop, but they have a lot of comic books too. So, setting more things on fire, 'cause fire is good. I remembered my last experience with Solomon Kane, but for many reasons I felt compelled to pick it up anyways. Who knows, maybe I misremembered something, or maybe the writer for that particular miniseries completely missed the mark. So later that weekend, I sat down on my balcony with a cold one and cracked open the book. To be completely honest, I only got through about half the book. I don't know if it was my previous bias or what, but I just couldn't focus. But I did read enough to get the picture. I did not get the picture. Similar to what I remembered, Solomon Kane in these stories is a Puritan Christian who mostly wanders around in search of adventure. No, seriously, he specifically states several times that he is just an adventurer. Not the most compelling motivation, but I appreciate the honesty. And he gets into the typical adventurer shenanigans, like stumbling across a town in fear of a monster, taking down baddies both human and not, and being sent back in time to help Conan take down a crazy cult. That was a weird one. It is kind of weird how they tried to rework Moon of Skulls to be a team-up book with Conan and Solomon Kane, but whatever. Alright. I seriously don't know why, but I just couldn't get into this, even though I love a good fantasy adventure story. My best guess is that I wasn't a fan of the writing style. Too much exposition and a bit old-fashioned, which again is very funny now that I'm looking back at this. Solomon Kane is still pretty stuck up when it comes to his religious beliefs, but he's more tolerable in these tales. While he does try to stick to the teachings of his god, he also acknowledges that other beliefs might have practices that would best assist him in slaying the monster of the week. I'm guessing it might have something to do with the fact that he's blood brothers with an African witch doctor who saved his ass from a horde of vampires with his voodoo magic. Yep, it's that old school, casually racist depiction of African culture, complete with leopard print bikinis and loincloths. Wow, yeah. I'm pretty sure that me back then would not recognize me now. At the very least, Kane realizes that not all barbaric magic is bad, though he does throw a temper tantrum about having to use that magic staff against a supernatural foe, which, yes, is very funny. There were a few things about Solomon Kane's stories that I personally found amusing. It's stressed in every tale that Kane is a Puritan Christian, but the writers and artists still do the whole sword and sorcery thing of having him interact with half-naked women. To their credit, he never sleeps with any of them and stays virtuous like a good faithful man. He is to the point of asexuality. Yeah, I do still find that very weird, how they still do the sword and sorcery thing where there's like naked or half-naked women everywhere, but he's like that. His whole thing is he's the Puritan, so I just found that very odd. I still find it a little odd now that I think of it. Also, I've never read anything so aggressively heterosexual and homosexual at the same time since JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now that I'm looking back on this paragraph, I have no idea what the hell I was talking about. Sure, there's plenty of sexy women around, but there's also a lot of manly bare chest, glistening skin, and flamboyant poses. My favorite example is when Kane encounters Dracula, who is very extra. Let's just say it's an interesting interpretation of the famous horror icon. And their ensuing fencing fight is also marvelous. Yeah, like, that's Dracula in the comic series. It's like, what the hell is that? That is not Dracula. Alright. Overall, I've come to the conclusion that these comics are not my thing. I don't like them, but I understand why others might. Some of the situations that Solomon Kane gets into are interesting, and he does have a cool aesthetic. I seriously believe that a good chunk of the appeal for this character is how much fun artists have drawing him, judging by all the miscellaneous artwork in this book and beyond. And hey, if this is the character to get you out of your art block, I'm not going to spoil the fun for you. Again, keep in mind, I only got through half the book and have no idea if these are the best Solomon Kane stories. I'm just thinking of Conan. I've also not read any of his modern stories, so I can't say anything about them. But if you fans have any recommendations, I'll be happy to give them a shot. If you want to explore some of the classics and don't mind the occasional casual racism, then give this a shot. I guess. I didn't like it, but it appeals to a lot of comic fans, but it appeals to a lot of comic fans, so maybe it will do something for you. So yeah, that was my attempt to understand Solomon Kane, and looking back, I was way more harsh than I ought to be, and way more unwilling to like listen and look at the work. I had 2 comments? Where are the 2 comments? Ah, very nice. Ah, that's the Roy Thomas brand. Yeah, looking back on it, I'm going to keep this article up because I think it's a good time capsule of how I evolved as a comic book reader. Because, like I said, nowadays I'm actually really excited to read more Solomon Kane stuff, and I don't entirely know what happened or how I changed my opinion. Because I don't even really know myself. I think it has something to do with the fact that I'm a lot less liberal now than I was back then. Or maybe I just got the hell over myself. I don't know what it is. So maybe I'll do, after I finish all the original Solomon Kane stories, I'll do a little update post to, you know, put the matter to rest. Alright, and I think a fun thing we could do for the last little leg of our journey is maybe look at characters who were inspired by Solomon Kane. Because there is quite a few. Inspired by pulp. Maybe this will have some answers for us. Is that supposed to be Conan? Again, he kind of looks like a doofus. Okay. Alright, Khan the Barbarian. Okay. Black Hawk. Do. It's an avenger. And Batman the Shadow of looks like this one is not quite what I was. Maybe TV Tropes will have a, because TV Tropes is more of like the trope, so maybe they'll talk more about like the archetype of Solomon Kane. Nope. Okay, well, I can think of a couple off the top of my head that look very, that it's like you look at it and it's like, yeah, that's Solomon Kane. The first one I can think of is Vampire Hunter D. I mean, just look at this guy. Like, just look at him. He's got the cape, the broad brim, he's got the sword. The only thing missing is he doesn't have the guns. And he fights supernatural forces. So you can definitely see the influence there. What's another good one? I've heard people say The Witcher before, but I'm not so sure about The Witcher. I haven't read any of The Witcher series, so I would not be able to tell you there. Bloop. 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 Why am I blanking? Let's look at some fan art then. Ooh, I wonder if there's anything on Instagram. There might be some fun art on Instagram. Ooh. From Luke Inc., Solomon Kane started as a simple character doodle and grew into this scene. Ooh, that is cool. Bloop. Solomon Kane in the ruins. That's nice. This is why I love fan art, because it'll give you like cool scenes that you have never seen before. Yeah. There he is. He's right over here, traveling around in Africa. I want to get this comic where he's fighting Conan the Barbarian. Because that looks like a fun series. I don't know who would win Conan versus Solomon Kane, because they're both experienced fighters, but I feel like Conan would have somewhat of an upper hand just because of his brute strength. Kane doesn't have his guns, which Conan does not have. On the set of the Solomon Kane movie. Why do I keep when I say Conan? Stop saying Conan, Heather. Maybe I'm just tired. If I kill you, I am bound for hell. It's a price I shall gladly pay. Oh, that's a pretty one. I love the detail of the vines, the sunset. Ooh, it's just a zoom in. Okay, I think I'm gonna like this one. I hope I can like it. Doop. I'm gonna go ahead and like it. Why will you not let me like it? Ah, there we go. Boop. There we go. And... what's this? Oh, Conan the Barbarian official. Is that Conan? That I like that. Solomon Kane and Conan would get arrested so fast if they were in today's society. Another nice one. I like the more lighter watercolors there. Boop. And this must be the action figure he was discussing in his video. Ah, and you can put on like the little blams on his guns too. Okay, so we get to see a little bit more movement on it. You get to change up the positioning and like how he does his accessories. So it looks like a fairly good model that you can change around if you want to. Yeah, there's a decent number of fan art here on Instagram. I'm a little surprised. Because, you know, Instagram. Instagram is very, very liberal. But I think I'm just stalling out time. So I believe now is a good time to stop the stream. But, hey, if you liked what I did with this stream, leave a comment, share the video, subscribe, and follow me on X so you can be able to vote on the next character we cover. Thank you guys for watching, and you have a good night. Bye.